Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. I was a kid when this happened, and even though the event itself was short, it has stayed with me for my entire life. I am 33 now, and my mom still remembers me coming to her about it that day. That is one of the reasons I know it was not just some random childhood thought that got bigger in my memory over time. I remember it, and she remembers me telling her about it right after it happened. There was no long delay, no years of me building it up into something different. I saw something in my room, something turned on my TV, and I went straight to my mom because I did not know what else to do. I was in my bedroom, doing homework. That is one of the things that makes the memory feel so normal at the start. I was not trying to scare myself. I was not watching a horror movie. I was not telling ghost stories with friends or sitting alone in the dark late at night. I was just a kid in my room doing schoolwork. It was one of those ordinary moments that should have faded into all the other boring childhood memories. A desk or a bed, papers in front of me, maybe a pencil in my hand. My mind focused on whatever assignment I had to finish. Nothing about the moment felt special. Then, I got this weird feeling. It is hard to explain that part, because it was not a sound at first, and it was not something I saw right away. It was more like my body noticed something before my mind did. I suddenly felt like I needed to look toward my door. Not slowly, not because I heard someone walking, but because something in me told me to look. It was the kind of feeling where the room changes without anything obvious happening. 1 second, you are doing what you are doing, and the next, you feel like you are not alone anymore. So I looked over at my door. That was when I saw him. There was a pure silhouette of a man leaning into my room. I say pure silhouette because that is what it looked like. There were no clear facial features, no eyes, no skin, no clothes in the normal sense. It was just the dark outline of a man. The shape was solid enough to understand immediately. It was not a blur or a shadow that could have been a coat hanging on something. It had the shape of a person leaning in through the doorway, and on his head was what looked like a fedora-style hat. That hat detail has always stayed with me. It made the figure feel more specific than just a random shadow. A human shape is already scary when it appears where no one should be, but the hat gave it a character. It looked like a man wearing a brimmed hat, leaning into my room as if he had a reason to be there. Not standing fully in the doorway. Not walking in normally. Just leaning in enough to reach or interact with the room. Then he turned my TV on. That is the part that made the whole thing impossible to explain away. If I had only seen the silhouette, maybe people could say I imagined it, or it was a trick of light, or a shadow from somewhere else. But the TV turned on. Something physical happened in the room. The figure leaned in, the TV came on, and then the figure leaned back out. It was not dramatic. There was no loud bang, no screaming, no wild movement. In a strange way, that made it even creepier. The motion was simple and almost casual, like this thing had just come into my space for one small purpose, done it, and left. For a second, I just sat there. I did not scream. I did not run immediately. I think I was too confused to react the way people imagine they would. Sometimes fear does not hit all at once. Sometimes your brain freezes because it is trying to decide what it just saw. I had been doing homework, and now a dark man-shaped silhouette in a fedora had leaned into my room and turned on my TV. That was not something my mind had a ready answer for. I sat there trying to process it, staring at the doorway or at the TV, probably waiting for the normal explanation to appear. But there was no normal explanation in the room. I got up and went downstairs to the basement, where my mom was. I asked her if she had turned on my TV. That might sound like a strange question, because if she was in the basement, obviously she had not been in my doorway. But I was a kid, and I needed some kind of answer. I needed to start with the most normal possibility. Maybe she had done something from another room. Maybe there was a remote. Maybe she had walked by, and I had somehow mistaken her for something else. I do not know what I expected her to say. I just needed the situation to become normal again. When I explained what happened, she did not have a good explanation. That matters too. My mom did not say something that made it all go away. She did not tell me, "Oh, that was me," or "the TV does that sometimes," or "it was just a reflection from outside." She had no real answer. She knew something had scared me enough to come ask her about it, and what I described was not something she could easily explain. I was a kid, yes, but I was not making up a big ghost story for attention. I had been doing homework, got a strange feeling, looked at the door, saw a silhouette of a man with a fedora, watched the TV turn on, and then went straight to her. Now that I am older, I think the stillness of the event is what makes it so creepy. The figure did not chase me. It did not speak. It did not point at me or walk fully into the room. It did not do anything violent. It simply leaned in, turned on the TV, and leaned back out. That almost makes it feel more deliberate. It was like it wanted me to notice it, but it did not need to do much. It knew that one small action would be enough. It was enough. I still remember it decades later. The doorway is the part I picture most clearly. Doorways are strange places in experiences like this. They are the line between where you are and where something else might be. A bedroom is supposed to be your safe space as a kid. It is where your toys are, your bed, your homework, your little world. The hallway outside your room is still part of the house, but it is also outside your personal space. Seeing something lean in through that boundary feels like a violation. It did not fully enter, but it crossed the line enough to make sure I saw it. I also think about the way I felt before I looked. That weird feeling came first. I did not randomly glance at the door and happen to see something. I felt something, then looked. That makes me wonder if the figure had already been there before I saw it. Maybe it was standing outside my room, watching, and I only noticed because some part of me sensed it. Maybe it leaned in at the same moment I turned. Maybe the feeling was the room reacting to its presence. I do not know, but I remember that feeling clearly enough to know it was part of the experience. It was not just seeing something, it was sensing it first. As an adult, I have tried to think through all the normal explanations. Could it have been a shadow? Maybe. But shadows do not turn on televisions. Could it have been a person in the house? If it had been a person, who was it? Why would they be in my room doorway? Why would they look like a dark silhouette in a fedora? Why would my mom have no explanation? Could it have been a reflection? Maybe some light from outside or inside formed a shape near the door. But again, the TV turned on at the same time. That physical part makes the simple explanations harder. Maybe the TV turned on by itself because of an electrical issue, and I imagined the figure in the same moment. That is possible if you want to be very practical. Electronics can glitch. Old TVs can turn on, if the power or remote signal does something strange. A child can be startled and misread a shadow, but that explanation does not match how the event felt. I did not hear the TV and then look for a cause. I got the feeling, looked at the door, saw the silhouette lean in, and then the TV came on. The order matters. It felt connected. It felt like the figure caused it. And then it leaned back out. That final movement is important too. It was not just a shape that appeared and vanished. It leaned in and then leaned back out, like someone peeking into a room. That motion made it feel aware. It felt like it chose to show itself only partly. I did not see it walk down the hall. I did not hear footsteps. I do not remember any sound from it at all. It simply withdrew from the doorway, leaving me sitting there with the TV on and my homework forgotten. The silence around it makes it even more disturbing. A real person makes small sounds. Clothing shifts. Feet move. A body has weight. But I do not remember any of that. I remember the visual shape and the TV turning on. If there were footsteps or other sounds, they did not stand out. The figure felt silent, like a shadow moving with purpose. The fedora-like hat also connects to a kind of figure many people talk about, though at the time I was just a kid and would not have known that. I did not have internet stories in my head. I was not thinking about shadow people or hat men or anything like that. I just saw what I saw, the silhouette of a man wearing a hat. Later in life, when I heard other people describe dark figures with hats, it made my old memory feel even stranger. I am not saying it was the same thing others have seen, but the detail has always bothered me because it was so specific. A plain shadow could be almost anything. A silhouette with a hat feels like someone. The fact that my mom still remembers it all these years later gives the story weight for me. Parents hear a lot of strange things from kids. Kids have dreams, fears, imaginary friends, and big reactions to small things. A lot of those stories get forgotten. But this one did not. I just turned 33, and my mom still remembers me coming to her about it. That tells me I must have been serious. It must have been clear that something had happened, or at least that I truly believed something had happened. It was not a silly moment that disappeared by dinner. It stayed. I wonder sometimes what my face looked like when I came downstairs. I wonder if I looked pale or confused. I wonder if I was shaking or just trying to be calm. I wonder if my mom, seeing me as a kid, could tell that I was not playing around. I asked her if she had turned on my TV because I needed to hear that she had. I needed her to say yes. I needed the man in the doorway to become my mom, the dark silhouette to become a misunderstanding, the TV turning on to become a normal thing. But she could not give me that answer. She did not know what it was. That is the part that follows you. Not just the event, but the lack of explanation from the adult you trusted to explain the world. When you are a kid, you go to your parents because they are supposed to know. They tell you what noises are. They tell you what is safe. They turn monsters into laundry piles and strange sounds into house noises. But when your parent has no good explanation, the fear stays open. It does not get closed and put away. It becomes one of those memories you carry into adulthood. I do not know what happened after I talked to her. Maybe I went back upstairs. Maybe she came with me. Maybe we checked the room, looked at the TV, and found nothing. I do not remember that part as clearly. What I remember is the moment of seeing the figure, the TV turning on, and going to my mom. That is usually how strange childhood memories work. Some parts fade, but the impossible part stays sharp. It also makes me wonder if the figure wanted something from me, or if it was simply passing through. It did not try to scare me in an obvious way, but it scared me anyway. It did not speak, but it got my attention. It did not touch me, but it changed something in the room. Turning on the TV feels almost like a signal, a way of saying, "I am here." It was a small action, but impossible to ignore. Maybe that was the point. If it had only leaned in and left, I might have convinced myself years later that I saw a shadow. But the TV turning on made it an event. It gave the figure an action. It gave me something to ask about. That is why I went to my mom. Not just because I saw something, but because something happened that could be checked. The TV was on. I wanted to know if she had done it. She had not. I also think about how young I was, doing homework alone in my room. Childhood bedrooms are full of emotion. They are where kids feel safe, bored, afraid, comfortable, and alone all at once. You learn the corners of that room better than anywhere else. You know what belongs and what does not. A strange shape in your doorway stands out immediately because it breaks the pattern of your world. It does not belong there. It does not behave like anything you understand. And when it interacts with something in your room, it becomes even more personal. For years, I have tried to decide whether I was more afraid of the figure itself or the fact that it turned on the TV. The figure was scary because it looked like a man made of darkness. But the TV was scary because it proved, at least to me, that the figure was not only something I saw, it could affect the room. It could reach in and make something happen. That is a different kind of fear. Seeing something impossible is one thing. Seeing it do something is another. I think if I had been older, I might have reacted differently. I might have jumped up, yelled, or run immediately. I might have checked the hallway. I might have tried to prove something to myself. But as a kid, I just sat there for a second. That pause feels very real to me. Children sometimes freeze when something does not fit their understanding of the world. They do not always scream. Sometimes they just stare, waiting for the world to correct itself. Mine did not. The silhouette leaned out, the TV stayed on, and I was left in my room with a question I could not answer. Even now I can imagine the shape clearly. A dark human outline at the doorway. The fedora-like hat, the lean into the room, the simple movement toward the TV, the retreat back out. It is almost too plain, and maybe that is why it feels real. It was not an overcomplicated monster. It was not a detailed horror image. It was just a man-shaped shadow doing one strange thing. Real scary memories often have that simplicity. They are not filled with movie details. They are one or two impossible facts that refuse to go away. The fact that my mom remembers it too does not prove what I saw, but it proves the experience had an impact right then. I told her when I was a kid, and she still remembers. That matters to me because memory can change, but shared memory holds certain things in place. She remembers me coming downstairs. She remembers me explaining what happened. She remembers not having a good explanation. That means the story did not begin years later. It began in that house, on that day, right after the TV turned on. I have wondered whether anything else strange happened in that house, but this is the memory that stands out. Maybe there were other small things I forgot. Maybe this was the only one. Sometimes a single event is enough to mark a place. You do not need a whole haunting. One clear, impossible moment can change the way you remember a room forever. For me, that room became the room where the man in the hat leaned in and turned on my TV. I do not know if it was a ghost, a shadow person, some kind of electrical coincidence mixed with a visual trick, or something else completely. I cannot prove anything. I can only say what happened from my side. I was doing homework in my room. I got a strange feeling and looked toward my door. I saw a pure silhouette of a man with a fedora-like hat lean into the room. He turned on my TV, then leaned back out. I sat there for a second, then went to the basement to ask my mom if she had turned it on. She had not, and she had no good explanation. That is all there was to it. No chase, no scream, no message, no big ending. Just a shadow man in my doorway, a TV turning on, and a memory that has lasted long enough for both me and my mom to still remember it now that I am 33. I used to have a recurring dream where I would float out of my body. At least I called it a dream because that was the easiest word for it. But it never felt like a normal dream. It did not feel like the kind of dream where you are suddenly in a random place with random people and nothing makes sense. It always started in my own room, with me in my own bed. And the first thing I would feel was myself rising. It was like I had slipped loose from my body somehow, like whatever part of me was aware had separated and started drifting upward. I would float up toward the ceiling and look down or look around the room, and the whole thing felt calm at first. Strange, but not exactly frightening. The first few times it happened, I did not really know what to do. I would just float near the ceiling, looking around my bedroom from above. Seeing your own room from that angle is weird in a way that is hard to explain. Everything is familiar, but it feels wrong, because you are looking at it from a place you are never supposed to be. You know what your bed looks like. You know the walls, the corners, the furniture, the windows, the door. But when you are up near the ceiling, just hanging there in the air, the room feels like a set or a model of itself. It is your room, but your relationship to it has changed. You are not standing in it or lying in it. You are above it, floating, watching. At first, I did not have much control. I would rise out of my body and sort of hover there, almost like I was weightless but still unsure of how to move. I remember looking around my room and feeling that strange mix of curiosity and disbelief. Part of me understood that I was dreaming, or at least assumed I must be, because people do not just float out of their bodies. But another part of me felt awake enough to take it seriously. The room looked like my room. The space felt real. The ceiling was right there above me, and my bed was below. It did not have that random shifting feeling normal dreams often have. It felt stable. Because it kept happening, I started to get used to it. That is the strange thing about recurring experiences. The first time, you are confused. The second time, you are surprised. But after enough times, your mind starts treating it almost like a skill. It becomes familiar. You begin to remember what happened before and wonder if you can change it this time. So eventually, I started learning how to control the flying part. It did not happen all at once, but little by little, I figured out how to move. Instead of just floating up and looking around, I could steer myself. I could choose where to go, or at least it felt like I could. Once I learned how to move, the experience became much bigger than just floating around my bedroom. I began pushing beyond the room itself. At some point, I realized I could go through walls. That sounds ridiculous when I say it plainly, but in the experience, it felt almost natural. The wall did not stop me the way it would in waking life. I could move toward it, pass through it, and suddenly be somewhere else. I started popping through walls into different apartments. It was like the building became something I could move through without using doors or hallways. I was no longer limited by the normal shape of the world. That part made the dreams feel even stranger. I was not just having random dream scenes. I was moving through spaces connected to where I actually was. I could leave my room, pass into other parts of the building, and even go above the apartment building itself. Floating above the building felt different from floating in the room. Inside the room, there was a sense of closeness and detail. Above the building, there was openness. The space expanded. The roof, the walls, the surrounding area, everything seemed below me. It felt like I had gone from being trapped in a body in a bedroom to moving freely through the whole place. There was something exciting about it too. Once the fear faded and I could control it, it almost became something I looked forward to. Not exactly on purpose, because I was not always trying to make it happen. But when it did happen, I would think, okay, I know what this is. I know I can move. I know I can fly. I know I can go through walls. That gave me a strange confidence inside the experience. I started experimenting with it. I would look around, move through spaces, rise higher, and see how far I could go. It felt less like being trapped in a dream and more like discovering a hidden ability that only worked when I was asleep. But even though it became familiar, it never became completely normal. There was always something strange under it. The feeling of being out of my body is not something you can make ordinary, no matter how many times it happens. Floating near the ceiling and looking around your room always carries a quiet wrongness. Passing through walls should not be possible. Moving above your apartment building without your body should not be possible. Even in the moment when I felt in control, some part of me understood that this was not like an ordinary dream. One of the last times it happened is the part that really stayed with me. During that experience, I floated out like usual. I was in my room again, aware of the space around me. By then, I already knew how to move around, and I had already had enough of these dreams that I was not panicking. I could float, fly, and look around. But that time, for some reason, I looked at the clock in my room. The time on the clock showed that it was only about 30 minutes after I had actually gone to bed. That detail hit me hard. It was one thing to have a recurring dream where I floated around and explored. It was another thing to see the clock and realize the time matched so closely to my real bedtime. It made the experience feel less like a dream that happened much later in the night and more like something that happened soon after I fell asleep. I had gone to bed, and about 30 minutes later, at least according to what I saw, I was floating out of my body and looking around the room. That felt wild. I know dreams can include clocks, and I know clocks in dreams can be strange or unreliable. I know the brain can create details that feel real. But seeing that time made the whole thing feel different. It gave the experience a kind of anchor to real life. It was not just some floating dream in a random dream world. It was my room, my bed, my clock, and a time that connected directly to when I had gone to sleep. That made me wonder if I had actually seen something real, or if my mind had somehow recreated it perfectly. I kept thinking about it afterward. If I had really gone to bed only 30 minutes earlier, then what exactly had happened? Was I dreaming? Was I in some light sleep stage? Was it an out-of-body experience? Was I astral projecting? Or was it just my brain making a very convincing version of my room? I did not have an answer. I still do not. But that clock detail made it harder to dismiss the experiences as ordinary dreams. The whole thing had always felt different from normal dreaming anyway. In normal dreams, things shift and change. You might be in your bedroom 1 second, and suddenly in a school, a store, or a place you have never been. People appear without explanation. Time jumps around. The logic of the dream world bends constantly, and you usually accept it until you wake up. But these floating dreams had a stable setting. They started with my body, my room, and the ceiling above me. The movement felt controlled. The apartments and building felt connected. It felt like I was moving through a real environment, not jumping through random dream scenes. That is why I have never been fully sure what to call it. Dream is the safest word. It is the word that sounds least dramatic, but it also feels incomplete. Astral projection is the word that comes to mind, though I do not know if that is exactly what it was. Maybe it was a lucid dream. Maybe I became aware while dreaming and learned to control the flying. Maybe my mind used my real room as a starting point because I had just fallen asleep. That explanation makes sense. But then there is the feeling of leaving the body. The way I floated to the ceiling, the way I moved through walls, and the time on the clock. Those details make it feel like something more. The strange part is that it does not happen anymore. At some point, the recurring dreams stopped. I did not make a big decision to end them. They just faded away. Maybe my sleep changed. Maybe my life changed. Maybe I stopped paying attention to them. Maybe I grew out of whatever state made them possible. I have not really tried to make it happen again either. Sometimes I wonder if I could, if I focused on it or practiced. But I have not pushed it. Part of me is curious, and part of me thinks maybe it is better not to force open a door that closed on its own. Because as interesting as it was, there was always a little unease around it. Flying around felt amazing, but leaving your body is not a small thing, even if it is just a dream. There is a reason people get nervous talking about experiences like that. The idea of being outside your body raises questions you may not be ready to answer. What exactly is leaving? What happens if you go too far? What happens if you cannot get back? I never had anything terrible happen during those dreams, but the possibility sits in the background when you think about it later. At the time, though, I was mostly fascinated. I remember the feeling of floating up, that smooth rise toward the ceiling, almost effortless. I remember realizing I could steer myself. I remember the first time I learned I could move through a wall, how strange and freeing it felt. I remember entering other apartments or spaces, looking around from a place I should not have been able to reach. I remember going above the apartment building and feeling the openness around me. And I remember that last clock moment, seeing the time and realizing only 30 minutes had passed since I had gone to bed. That moment with the clock made me question everything more than any of the flying did. Flying can feel dreamlike, even when it is vivid. Passing through walls can feel like dream logic, but the clock made it feel tied to the real room. It made me wonder if I was not just dreaming about flying, but somehow perceiving the room as it really was. That is a strange thought. It is also hard to prove. If you tell someone you saw a clock in a dream, they will say the brain can do that. And they are right. But if you were the one floating there, looking at your own clock from near the ceiling, it feels much stranger than that explanation makes it sound. I sometimes wish I had tested it more. If I had known it was going to stop happening, maybe I would have tried to do something specific. Maybe I would have looked for details I could confirm later. Maybe I would have gone into another room and tried to notice something I could check when I woke up. Maybe I would have tried to read something, remember an object's position, or see something outside the apartment building. But at the time, I was mostly experiencing it, not investigating it. You do not always think like a scientist inside something strange. Sometimes you are too busy being amazed. Now that it does not happen anymore, it feels like one of those weird abilities you had for a short period and then lost, like a door opened for a while and then quietly closed. I do not know why it started, and I do not know why it stopped. Maybe I was in the right mental state then. Maybe my sleep pattern made it easier. Maybe I was accidentally entering lucid dreams. Maybe I was actually leaving my body. I do not know. The uncertainty is part of what makes it interesting. What I know is that it happened enough times to become recurring. It was not just one strange night. It happened again and again. And over time, I learned how to control the movement. That alone makes it different from a random nightmare. I did not just wake up once, thinking I floated. I had repeated experiences where I rose out of my body, moved around the room, and eventually learned to fly through walls and above the building. It had a pattern. It had progression. I got better at it. That progression is one of the reasons it felt real to me. Dreams often repeat, but learning inside them can feel different. The first times, I was just floating. Then, I started to control it. Then I moved through walls. Then, I went farther. It felt like practice. It felt like I was gaining control over something that already existed, not just dreaming random flight scenes. There was a sense of continuity between the experiences. I would remember what I had done before and try to go beyond it. The apartment building also felt like a real setting, not a dream version that kept changing. That matters, because dreams often create places that only vaguely resemble reality. But in these experiences, the starting point was consistent. My room, my ceiling, my walls, my apartment building. That made it feel grounded. Even when I was doing impossible things, I was doing them in a place that felt real and familiar. I have talked to people who say they have had similar experiences, and the descriptions often overlap. Floating upward, seeing the room from above, feeling separated from the body, moving through walls, flying above the house or building. Some people call it astral projection. Some call it lucid dreaming. Some call it sleep paralysis related. Some think it is spiritual. Some think it is purely the brain. I do not know which explanation is right, but I know the experience itself feels powerful when you are inside it. For me, it never felt like sleep paralysis, because I was not trapped and scared. I could move, or at least it felt like I could move. I was not pinned to the bed. I was not seeing a dark figure standing over me. It felt more open than that. But maybe it happened in the same in-between state between sleep and waking. Maybe my body was asleep, and my mind was aware enough to create a fully controlled dream. Maybe the floating out feeling was my brain's way of explaining that state. I can see how that could be possible. Still, that does not fully remove the mystery. The part I keep coming back to is how natural it began to feel. The first time, floating out would seem impossible, but after it happened enough, I accepted it inside the experience. I did not fight it. I rose up, looked around, and started moving. That comfort may be why I was able to control it more. Fear can trap you, but curiosity lets you explore. Once I stopped being shocked by the idea of floating, I could focus on flying. Once I figured out flying, walls stopped mattering. Once walls stopped mattering, the whole building opened up. That is wild to think about now. I do not know why it stopped. Maybe I stopped needing it. Maybe I stopped being in that sleep state. Maybe it was connected to stress, age, routine, or something else I did not notice at the time. I have not tried to bring it back, though I sometimes wonder what would happen if I did. Part of me wants to know if I could still do it. Part of me thinks it might be better to leave it alone, not because it was bad, but because some experiences feel like they should not be forced. If it happened again, I think I would pay closer attention. I would look at the clock again. I would try to remember exact details. I would try to confirm something afterward. But maybe thinking like that would ruin it. Maybe the reason it happened was because I was not trying too hard. Maybe it came naturally because I was relaxed enough to slip into that state. I do not know. All I know is that for a period of time, I had recurring dreams where I floated out of my body and up to the ceiling. I could look around my room from above. Eventually, I learned how to control the flying. I started moving through walls into different apartments, and even above the apartment building itself. One of the last times it happened, I looked at the clock in my room and saw that it was only about 30 minutes after I had actually gone to bed. It does not happen anymore. I have not really tried to make it happen again, but I still think about it, because whatever it was, dream or something more, it felt like I had briefly learned how to leave the normal limits of my body and move through the world in a way I was never supposed to. This happened around midnight in 1976, on the back roads of Missouri, far away from anything that felt like civilization. We were driving through an area that felt like it had been forgotten by the rest of the world. There were no stores, no houses close by, no gas stations, no signs of life, nothing that made you feel like help was nearby if something went wrong. We were about 30 miles from the nearest real source of humanity, and at that hour, the road felt even more empty than it probably was. It was the kind of road where the darkness seems to sit right up against the car windows, and the headlights only show you a small piece of the world at a time. Everything beyond that beam of light might as well not exist. There were 4 of us in the car that night. I have always been grateful for that, because if I had been alone, I probably would have spent the rest of my life trying to convince myself I had hallucinated the whole thing. But I was not alone. There were 4 of us, and all of us saw what we saw. We still talk about that night, even after all these years, because none of us has ever found a good explanation for it. It was one of those nights that started out like any other stupid young person drive, the kind where you are just out on the road, looking for something to do, not expecting anything stranger than maybe trouble with cops or a dumb prank. But that night became one of the weirdest nights of my life. The first strange thing happened before we saw the man on the guard rail. About half an hour earlier, we came across a group of kids standing in the middle of the highway. There were around 8 of them, and I say kids because they looked high school age. They were wearing gym clothes, shorts and t-shirts, the kind of shirts you could turn inside out if you were on the opposing team. That detail stuck with me because it made them look like they had walked straight out of some school gym or sports practice, except it was the middle of the night. They were on a dark highway, and there was no school, field, bus, or car anywhere around them. They were not standing on the shoulder. They were not walking along the side of the road like hitchhikers or stranded kids trying to get somewhere. They were in the middle of the highway, walking in our direction. The road curved there, which made it even more dangerous. We came upon them suddenly enough that we had to stop the car to avoid hitting them. If we had been going faster, or if we had not reacted in time, they could have been killed. Any normal person standing in the middle of the road at night would have jumped out of the way the second headlights came around that curve. These kids did not. They just kept walking toward us. At first, we were angry more than scared. That was the normal reaction. We thought they were idiots playing some kind of stupid game in the road. Maybe they were trying to scare drivers. Maybe they were drunk or high. Maybe it was a prank. We had to stop the car, and in the headlights this whole group kept walking toward us, like they did not understand or care that they could be hit. Their faces looked blank from where we were sitting. Their movements were dull and slow, almost zombie-like. They were not laughing. They were not waving. They were not yelling at us. They just kept coming. We got out of the car and yelled at them. We called them idiots and cursed at them, telling them how dumb it was to be playing in the road and how they could cause an accident. We expected some kind of reaction, a laugh, a smart mouth answer, someone running off, someone saying they were sorry, anything, but they gave us nothing. They kept walking in our direction in that same dull way, like they did not even hear us. That was when the anger started turning into something else. The whole scene felt wrong. 8 kids in gym clothes, in the middle of a remote highway at midnight, moving like they were not fully aware of the world around them. We got back in the car and decided to drive at them, playing chicken, thinking that would make them finally break and scramble away. It was stupid, but we were young and confused and still half convinced this was some prank. We thought there was no way they would keep walking if a car moved toward them. Anybody with a survival instinct would get out of the road. But they did not flinch. They did not scatter. They did not even speed up. They just kept walking westward, like the car did not matter at all. We had to steer around them onto the shoulder to avoid hitting them. They forced us to go around because they refused to move. As we passed, all of us looked back, trying to understand what had just happened. I remember looking out the back window, and everyone in the car was saying some version of, "What the hell was that?" We could hardly believe it. It did not feel like normal drunk behavior. It did not feel like kids messing around. It felt like we had driven through a scene that should not have been there. They had walked straight at a car, ignored us yelling, ignored the headlights, ignored the danger, and kept moving like they were in a trance. We drove to the bottom of the hill, still talking about it, and then decided to turn around. We wanted to verify what we had just seen. Maybe part of us wanted to prove to ourselves that it was real. Maybe part of us wanted to watch them finally run off or admit it was a joke. So we crossed the median and drove back the other way. When we reached them again, they had also crossed the median. That median was not some clean strip of grass either. It was knee-deep, full of chiggers, and not the kind of place anyone would casually walk through in gym shorts at night unless they were out of their mind. But they had crossed it, and now they were walking in the eastbound lanes. Again, we stopped the car. Again, we yelled at them. We still tried to tell ourselves they were drugged-out kids or pranksters, but it was getting harder to believe. They did not react like people playing a prank. They did not laugh, talk, or acknowledge us. They just kept walking toward us with those blank, dull movements. We drove toward them again, expecting them to finally break. Again, they did not flinch. Again, we had to drive around them on the shoulder. It was creepy as hell, and by then the whole thing had stopped being funny. We decided to go to the nearest payphone and call the police. At that age, I will admit part of us probably thought it would be entertaining to watch a bunch of idiot kids get arrested for playing in the road. We were still trying to turn it into something normal, something we could laugh about. So we drove up the road, found a payphone, and called it in. Then we drove back to where we had seen them. They were gone, not scattered down the shoulder, not standing in the grass, not hiding by a fence, not walking farther up the road. Gone, there was nowhere obvious they could have gone that fast. It was the middle of nowhere. Open road, fields, dark woods or brush, and not much else. 8 kids do not just vanish from a highway in a few minutes, especially when they had been moving slowly and not reacting to anything around them. We looked. They were nowhere to be seen. Nowhere. That alone would have been enough to make the night unforgettable. But about half an hour after that, we saw the man on the guardrail. We were still on the back roads, still far from town, still talking about those kids and trying to figure out what we had just witnessed. Then the headlights picked up something ahead on the side of the road. There, sitting on a guardrail as if he had all the time in the world, was a man. He had one leg crossed over the other, his elbow resting on his knee, and his hand under his chin like the thinking man pose. He was not standing by a broken-down car. He was not waving us down. He was not walking along the road. He was just sitting there in that pose, perfectly still, and he was dressed like a gangster from the 1930s. I mean the whole thing. A pin-striped suit, a hat with the brim turned down, spats on his shoes, the whole enchilada. He looked like he had stepped out of another time and sat down on that guardrail in the middle of nowhere. He was not dressed like anyone we would expect to see in rural Missouri in 1976. especially not at midnight on a remote road 30 miles from anything. The outfit was so specific that it did not look like random old clothing. It looked like a costume, except there was no reason for anyone to be in costume out there. He was staring straight across the road. That was one of the creepiest parts. He did not look at us. He did not turn his head when our headlights hit him. He did not react to the car coming down the highway at all. He sat there with that blank stare, looking straight across the road like we did not exist. The headlights should have gotten his attention. The sound of the car should have gotten his attention. 4 young people driving through the middle of nowhere at midnight should have at least made him glance over. But he did not seem to recognize the car, the lights, or anything around him. We passed him, and for a moment, nobody knew what to say. After what had happened with the kids, seeing this man felt like the night had become completely disconnected from normal life. First, 8 high school-aged kids walking zombie like in the middle of a highway, not reacting to danger, then disappearing. Then a man dressed like he belonged in the 1930s, sitting alone on a guardrail in the middle of nowhere, staring blankly across the road. If it had only been one of those things, maybe we could have explained it away. But both in the same night, on those empty roads, made the whole thing feel unreal. The man's stillness was almost worse than if he had done something dramatic. If he had waved at us, shouted, stumbled, or tried to stop the car, we could have made him into a person with a reason. Maybe drunk, maybe stranded, maybe some local eccentric. But he did not interact with the world. He looked posed, like an image placed there. A man from another decade, sitting on a guardrail, with his hand on his chin, not blinking at the car lights, not following us with his eyes, not caring that we were there. There were 4 of us in the car, and all of us saw him. That is what keeps me from dismissing it. A single person can imagine things. A tired driver can misread shadows. One passenger can see a shape and turn it into a man in their mind. But 4 people saw the same thing. 4 people had already been shaken by the kids in the road, and then 4 people saw a man in full old-time gangster clothing sitting in the dark like he had been waiting there for no one. I do not remember if we stopped for him. I do not think we did, and I am glad. After the kids, nobody in that car was in the mood to get out and question another impossible thing. The road already felt wrong. The night felt wrong. That man felt like something we were not supposed to approach. Sometimes you see something strange, and every instinct tells you not to get closer. Just keep driving. That is what we did. It is hard to explain the feeling of that night to someone who was not there. The kids by themselves were disturbing because they moved like they were not fully human or not fully aware. The man by himself was disturbing because he looked like he did not belong to that place or time. Together, the 2 events made us feel like we had driven through some strange pocket of reality, a place where people appeared on roads they should not have been on, dressed wrong, moving wrong, reacting wrong, and then disappearing without explanation. The kids were especially dangerous to think about. They could easily have been hit. They were in the middle of a curve, in the middle of the highway, and they did not care about traffic. They walked toward headlights like they either did not see the danger or were not afraid of it. We yelled at them, drove toward them, and still they kept moving. Then they crossed that awful median and did the same thing in the opposite lanes. If they were real kids on drugs, they were in serious danger. If they were pranksters, they were unbelievably committed. But when we came back after calling the police, they were gone too fast and too completely for any normal explanation to feel satisfying. The man on the guardrail felt like a different kind of impossible. He was not endangering himself in the same active way. He was simply there, out of place and out of time. I can still picture the pinstripe suit and the brim of the hat turned down. I can picture the spats on his shoes. I can picture that thinking man pose, the elbow on the knee, the hand on the chin. It was almost theatrical, except nothing about the setting made sense. No party nearby, no event, no people, no car. Just a man dressed like an old gangster sitting on a guardrail in rural darkness. The way he ignored us is what makes my skin crawl. Most people on a deserted road at midnight would react to a car. Even if they were trying to look calm, their eyes would move. They would glance. They would shift their body. They would do something. He did nothing. He was staring across the road like he was watching something we could not see, or like he was locked into that position. It was like we were the ones passing through his scene, not the other way around. I know how all of this sounds. It sounds like something someone would make up around a campfire, and I understand that. But this is a no-shit true story. There were 4 of us. We witnessed it together. We talked about it then, and we still talk about it now. The details have stayed with us because they were too strange to forget. The kids in gym clothes, the highway curve, the way they would not move, the chigger-filled median, the payphone, the empty road when we returned, the man in gangster clothes sitting on the guardrail half an hour later. All of it happened in the same night. And then, as if the night had not already been weird enough, it ended with me getting arrested. After everything with the kids and the man on the guardrail, I eventually dropped off my friends and started heading home. I stopped at the local car wash, which was a place where we kids always loitered. That was normal for us. The cops would come by sometimes and run us off, and usually that was all it was. They would tell us to move along, we would complain or act innocent, and then we would leave. But that night, after everything else, the police decided to do more than just run us off. A cop pulled up, and instead of simply telling us to leave, they searched my car. They found some weed. Back then, that was enough for them to proudly take my scrawny ass to jail for the night. So after a night of seeing zombie-like kids in the road, calling the police on them, watching them vanish, and then seeing a man dressed like a 1930s gangster sitting alone on a guardrail in the middle of nowhere, I ended the night sitting in jail over weed. In a strange way, the arrest almost makes the story feel more real to me, because it grounds the whole night in something ordinary and stupid. The weirdness was not a dream. It was not some foggy memory from falling asleep. It was part of a real night that continued into normal consequences. We saw things we could not explain. Then life kept going in the most human, boring, annoying way possible. Cops, car search, weed, jail. That contrast has always stuck with me. The night started like reality was coming apart on a back road, and it ended with me getting arrested like any dumb kid in the 1970s. But the arrest is not what we still talk about most. We talk about the kids. We talk about the man. We talk about how those kids walked in front of a car without flinching. We talk about how they crossed the median and kept doing it in the other lanes. We talk about how we called the police and came back, only to find them gone. We talk about the man sitting on the guardrail, dressed head to toe like he had stepped out of another decade, staring straight across the road without reacting to us at all. We talk about how far out we were, how late it was, and how none of it made sense. Maybe there are normal explanations. Maybe the kids were high out of their minds, and they found some place to hide before we came back. Maybe the man was some eccentric local, dressed for reasons only he understood, sitting on a guardrail because he wanted to. Maybe the two events were unrelated, and we only connected them because they happened on the same strange night. I can say those things because they are possible. But possible is not the same as satisfying. The kids did not act like normal high kids. The man did not act like a normal person sitting on the side of a road. The timing, the location, the emptiness, and the way everyone behaved made the whole thing feel like we had driven through something we were not meant to understand. If I had been alone, I would have questioned myself forever. I would have blamed tiredness, darkness, road hypnosis, anything. But I was not alone. 3 other people saw the same things I saw. 3 other people reacted the same way. 3 other people still remember that night. That is why I do not try too hard to explain it anymore. Some nights just stay strange. Midnight in 1976, on a lonely back road in Missouri. 4 of us saw 8 kids walking like zombies in the middle of a highway. They would not move for our car, would not answer us, and vanished after we called the police. Half an hour later, we saw a man in full 1930s gangster clothing sitting on a guardrail, posed like he was thinking, staring across the road and not reacting to us at all. I do not know who they were. I do not know where they went. I only know we all saw them, and none of us has ever forgotten it. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmayer Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. When I was in my early 20s and had just started dating my now husband, I used to go over to his place all the time. We were still in that early stage of the relationship where everything felt new, and spending time together at his house was part of getting to know him and his family. The house itself was one of the first things I noticed. It was in Miami, and it was old, but in a really cool way. It had character. It did not feel like some plain modern house with empty white walls and a perfect layout. It looked almost like it was made of coral, or at least that is how I remember it. It had that strange South Florida look that can feel beautiful in the daytime and a little unsettling at night. It was an odd house too. Not bad, just odd. It had lots of little nooks and crannies, small spaces, strange corners, and areas that felt like they were added or shaped in a way you would not find in a newer home. Old houses often have that feeling, like they have been changed over time or built with little secrets inside them. During the day, those little spaces felt interesting. At night, they felt different. A strange corner is cute when the sun is coming through the windows. A tiny crawl space inside a closet is funny when you are playing hide and seek. But once the house gets quiet and the lights are low, those same spaces can start to feel like places where something could hide. My husband has a younger sister, and at the time she was about 7 years old. She loved hanging out with us whenever I was there. She was sweet and funny and full of energy, the way kids are when they like being included by older people. Even though I was there to spend time with my boyfriend, his little sister was often around us too, wanting to play or talk or just be part of whatever we were doing. I did not mind. She was part of the house, part of the family, and part of those early memories with him. His parents were divorced, and his sister would go to her dad's house every other weekend. On the day this happened, she was going to be picked up later in the evening, but she was home throughout the day. We hung out with her, played with her, and spent time like normal. There was nothing scary about the day at first. It was just one of those ordinary family afternoons where a kid wants attention and everyone plays along. Looking back now, that normal part matters because what happened later used something from that day. Something so specific and personal that it still bothers me. One of the last games we played with her before she left, was hide and seek. In a house full of strange little spaces, hide and seek was actually a great game. There were closets, corners, little tucked away places, and odd spaces that were perfect for a child to squeeze into. At some point, we were looking for her and could not find her right away. Then we heard her laugh. That was how we found her. She had hidden inside this tiny, unused crawl space that was inside my boyfriend's closet. The crawl space itself was strange. It was not a normal part of a bedroom where you would expect someone to hang out. It was tucked inside the closet, small and unused, the kind of place you might not even think about unless you knew it was there. For a 7-year-old playing hide and seek, it was probably the perfect hiding spot. She could crawl in, stay quiet, and wait for us to find her. But she gave herself away because she laughed. And that laugh is important. His sister has a very distinct giggle. It is not a normal, plain laugh that could belong to anyone. It is unique to her. To this day, people still comment on it. If you know her, you know that giggle. It has its own sound, its own rhythm, something you can recognize instantly. That day, when we heard it from the crawl space, there was no confusion. It was her. She laughed, and we found her. It was funny and cute in the moment, just a kid losing the game because she could not hold in her laughter. Later that evening, she left to go to her dad's house. A few hours passed. It was late by then, and no one else was home. My boyfriend and I were lying on his bed, talking and hanging out. It was one of those quiet, late-night moments when the house feels different after the day has ended. Earlier, the place had been active, full of movement and voices, with his little sister running around and playing. Now, the house was still. The rooms were quiet. The energy had changed. It was just the two of us in his bedroom, relaxed and talking, with the closet nearby and the little crawl space hidden inside it. Then we heard a noise from inside his closet. It sounded like a door creaking open. The main closet door was closed, so at first that did not make sense. We both noticed it. It was not one of those sounds where one person hears something and the other has no idea what they are talking about. We both heard it. It came from the closet area, and it sounded like something inside had shifted or opened. Since the main closet door was shut, the only thing that made any sense was the small crawl space door inside the closet. The same crawl space where his little sister had hidden earlier that day. We both looked at each other, confused. That is one of those moments where time seems to pause for a second. You hear something that does not fit, and before you say anything, you look at the other person to see if they heard it too. Their face confirms it before any words do. I could tell he had heard the same thing I heard, and he could tell I had too. We were both trying to process it. No one else was home. His sister had been gone for hours. The house was quiet. The closet door was shut. Yet something inside that closet had just made a noise like a little door opening. Then, while we were making eye contact, we heard it. His sister's giggle, clear as day. It came from inside the closet, from the same area where she had hidden in the crawl space earlier. It was not a vague laugh. It was not a sound that could have been the house settling or something moving in the walls. It was her giggle, her exact giggle. The one we knew, the one people recognized, the one that had given away her hiding place only a few hours before. It came from inside that closet, in the dark, when she was not home. We froze. For a couple of seconds, we just stared at each other with our eyes wide open. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. There is a kind of fear that is so sudden and so specific that your body does not know what to do with it at first. It was not a general creepy feeling. It was not just an odd noise in an old house. It was a perfect copy of a child's giggle coming from the exact hiding place that child had used earlier, even though she was gone. That made it feel deliberate, like something in that crawl space had heard her laugh earlier and was repeating it back to us. I cannot fully explain how terrifying that was. A child's giggle is usually a happy sound. It should be harmless. It should make you smile. But when you hear it coming from a dark closet in an empty house, from a child who is miles away, it becomes something else completely. It stops feeling cute and starts feeling wrong, deeply wrong. Because a laugh means a presence. A laugh means someone is there, or something wants you to think someone is there. And this was not just any laugh. It was his sister's laugh. That is the part that still makes the hair on my arms stand up. Whatever made that sound did not choose a random noise. It mimicked her exact giggle from earlier that same day. It chose something personal, something familiar, something we would both recognize instantly. It came from the same little crawl space where she had been hiding. It was like the house had saved that sound and played it back at the worst possible time. For those first few seconds, I could not move. My body went completely still. I think part of my brain was trying to find a normal explanation, but there was none. His sister was not home. No one else was home. There was no TV on in the closet, no toy making the sound, no phone playing a recording, no reason for her laugh to come from that space. And because both of us heard it at the same time, I could not tell myself I imagined it. Finally, I found the courage to unfreeze. I did not walk calmly to the closet. I did not open the door and investigate. I did not try to act brave. I ran. I got off his bed and ran straight out of his room. I did not care how I looked. I did not care if I seemed dramatic. I wanted distance between myself and that closet immediately. My boyfriend followed right behind me. That alone tells you how real it felt. He lived there. It was his house, his room, his sister, his closet. If anyone might have tried to be calm or explain it away, it would have been him. But he ran too. We both refused to stay there that night. There was no discussion where one of us tried to talk the other down. We both knew what we had heard. We both knew his sister was gone. We both knew the sound had come from inside the closet. And we both wanted out. Sometimes fear does not need a long conversation. Sometimes two people hear the same impossible thing, and the decision is made without words. You leave. That house had other strange occurrences too, but that one takes the cake for me. It was the one that felt the most direct, the most personal, and the hardest to explain. Old houses make noises. Miami houses can have animals, wind, settling sounds, strange echoes, and all kinds of little things that can be brushed off if you really want to. But a perfect giggle is not a floorboard creaking. A familiar child's laugh from inside a crawl space is not the house settling. A sound that both people hear at the same time, from the same place where the child had hidden earlier, is not easy to dismiss. I have thought about possible explanations over the years. Maybe there was some toy in the closet that made a laughing sound. But that does not fit because it was her giggle, not a generic toy noise. Maybe someone outside made a sound and it somehow carried into the room. But it came from the closet, and we both reacted to that direction. Maybe one of us misheard something, and the other picked up on the fear. But we both heard it while looking at each other, and we both knew what it was. Maybe it was a memory sound in our heads because we had heard her laugh there earlier. But shared memory does not usually come out of a closed closet as a clear sound. The mimic part is what scares me most. I do not know what else to call it. Something mimicked her. Not just a child's laugh. Her laugh. It copied the sound from earlier that day and repeated it later when she was gone. That gives the whole thing a disturbing intelligence. It suggests that whatever was in that house was not just making random noises. It noticed. It listened. It chose the sound that would affect us the most. That thought still bothers me after all these years. There is something deeply unsettling about anything that mimics a loved one, especially a child. A child's voice or laugh creates an automatic emotional response. You know it, you trust it, and you react to it before thinking. If his sister had actually been home and giggled from the closet, we would have laughed and told her to come out. The sound would have pulled us toward her, but because she was not there, the same sound became a trap in the mind. It made us want to understand, but it also made every instinct scream not to go near it. The crawl space itself made it worse. A closet is already a strange place at night, but a small, unused crawl space inside a closet feels like a hidden mouth in the room. It is not a normal place people sit. It is not open and visible. It is tucked away, tight, dark, and separate from the rest of the bedroom. Earlier, when his sister hid in it, it had been playful. Later, after the giggle, it felt like something else had been hiding there too. I do not know if it was connected to the house being old. Maybe that house had history. Maybe something had been there long before I started coming around. Maybe the strange nooks and crannies held more than dust and old air. The house always felt unusual, and after that night, I never saw it the same way again. A house can be beautiful and still have something off inside it. A house can look cool and still feel watched. That Miami coral-looking house had charm, but it also had spaces where the darkness felt too deep. The fact that we had been together for only a short time then, and now we have been together for 14 years, makes the memory even stronger. It became one of those shared stories that stayed with us through the relationship. We were young when it happened, lying on his bed, still new in each other's lives. Now, years later, we still remember that exact moment. The eye contact, the creak from the closet, the giggle, the frozen silence afterward, the way we both ran. That shared memory matters. When something scary happens alone, people can doubt you, and you can even doubt yourself. But when someone else hears the same thing and reacts the same way, it locks the event into place. There is no pretending it was just your imagination. He heard it too. He knew his sister's laugh better than anyone. He knew she was not home. He knew the sound came from the closet. His reaction confirmed mine. I think about what would have happened if we had opened the closet. Part of me is glad we did not. Maybe there would have been nothing there, and in a way, that would have been even worse. Opening the door and finding an empty closet after hearing that giggle would only make the sound more impossible. Or maybe something would have been out of place. Maybe the crawlspace door would have been open. Maybe the air would have felt different. Maybe we would have heard it again, closer this time. I do not know, and I am okay with not knowing. Some doors do not need to be opened. That is how I feel about that closet now. Whatever made that sound wanted a reaction, and it got one. We froze, we panicked, and we left. Maybe that was all it wanted. Maybe it was playing with us. Maybe it was trying to show that it could copy something familiar. Maybe it was just repeating energy from earlier, like an echo. I have wondered if it could have been residual, like the house replaying the sound of her laughter from the hide-and-seek game. But it felt too timed, too perfect. The creak came first, like something opening inside the closet. Then the giggle came while we were already looking at each other in confusion. That sequence felt active. If it had been residual energy, maybe it would have happened randomly, like a recording. But this felt like something noticed we had heard the door and then gave us the laugh. I cannot prove that. I only know how it felt. It felt like a response. It is also strange that the sound came from the exact spot where she had been hiding. Not just anywhere in the house. Not the hallway. Not the kitchen. Not behind us. The same crawl space. That makes it hard not to connect the events. Earlier in the day, his sister hid there and laughed. Later that night, after she was gone, something in that space made the same laugh. It is almost too direct. too clean, too specific. That is why this memory still gives me goosebumps. It is not because something attacked us. It is not because we saw a full figure or watched an object fly across the room. It is because the event felt intelligent enough to be personal. It used a sound that belonged to someone we loved, and it placed that sound in a space where it should not have been. It turned a sweet memory from earlier that day into something frightening. I can still picture the bedroom. The bed where we were lying, the closed closet door, the quiet late-night feeling, the moment the sound came from inside, the way we looked at each other, both silently asking if the other had heard it. Then the giggle, clear and unmistakable. His sister's exact giggle from inside the closet hours after she had left the house. That is the kind of thing that does not fade easily. We have been together 14 years now, and we still remember that moment. It is one of those stories that comes up every so often, and even after all this time, it still has the power to make my skin prickle. We can talk about it calmly now, but the feeling comes back if I really sit with it. The fear was not only from the sound itself, it was from knowing something had copied her. Something in that little crawl space had repeated the exact laugh of a 7-year-old girl who was not there anymore. I do not know what was in that house. I do not know what was inside that crawl space. But I know what we heard, and I know we did not sleep there that night. I was driving overnight by myself to visit some friends in another state. I had gotten off work at around 10:30 at night, and instead of waiting until the next day, I decided to make the drive right then. At that age, or in that kind of mood, a late-night drive does not always feel like a bad idea at first. You tell yourself the roads will be clear, traffic will be light, and you will get there faster. You get in the car after work, tired but still awake enough, and you start moving through the dark with the radio on and your mind fixed on where you are going. For the first part of the trip, everything felt normal. It was just me, the highway, and the long empty stretch ahead. By around midnight, my gas tank was getting low. Not dangerously low at first, but low enough that I started paying attention to it. Anyone who has driven alone late at night knows that feeling when the needle gets too close to empty and the road ahead starts looking longer than it did before. During the day, it is annoying. At night, especially when you are not in your own area, it feels different. Every exit matters more. Every dark stretch between towns feels longer. You start doing the math in your head, trying to decide whether you can make it to the next safe stop or whether you should take the next chance you see. I saw a sign that said there was a rest stop about 40 miles ahead. 40 miles might not sound like much in normal conditions, but when you are watching the gas gauge drop and you are alone after midnight, 40 miles can feel like a gamble. I did not want to push it. The last thing I wanted was to run out of gas on the side of the highway in the middle of the night, in a state I did not know well, with no one nearby. So when I saw an exit with a gas station, I decided to get off and fill up enough to keep going. The exit did not feel busy. It had that late-night, half-dead look that some roadside stops get after everything closes. Across the street, there was a restaurant, but it was closed. There were also 2 smaller homes or apartments nearby, but nothing looked active. No people walking around. No customers. No cars pulling in and out. The gas station itself was closed too. The inside lights were off, so the building looked dead, but the outside lights were still on over the pumps. That gave the place a false sense of safety. It was bright enough that it did not feel completely abandoned, and the pumps still worked with a credit card, so I figured I would just get gas quickly and leave. I pulled in and parked near one of the pumps. Before getting out, I looked around. I was alone, and because I knew it was late and the station was closed, I checked my surroundings on purpose. I did not see anyone. There was no one by the restaurant, no one near the smaller buildings, no one standing by the pumps, no one sitting in a car. The place was quiet, maybe too quiet, but not in a way that made me leave right away. It just felt like a closed gas station in the middle of the night. In front of my car, off to the side of the gas station, there was a huge tree standing in an otherwise empty grassy field. That tree is the detail that still stays with me. It was big, and it stood out because there was not much else around it. The field was open, just grass, and then that tree. I noticed it because I was checking the area, but I did not think anything of it at the time. It was just a tree. It did not seem like a hiding place because the branches did not start low to the ground. The lowest branches were maybe 6 or 7 feet up, high enough that someone would have had to climb to get into it. There was no ladder, no low limb you could casually sit on from the ground. Nothing about it made me think a person would be up there. I got out of the car and started pumping gas. I stayed near the nozzle while the tank filled. I was not planning to go inside because the station was closed and I wanted to be done as fast as possible. I probably kept glancing around, the way you do when you are alone somewhere unfamiliar at night. But everything still seemed empty. The pump clicked and hummed, the outside lights buzzed faintly, and the dark around the station stayed still. I remember feeling aware of the space, but not afraid yet. I had made a careful decision: stop here, pump the gas, leave, and get back on the highway. About 30 to 60 seconds after I started filling up, I heard something hit the ground. It was not a small sound. It was the kind of sound that instantly pulls your attention because it does not belong. Something heavy had dropped or landed nearby. I turned and looked toward the huge tree in the grassy field. A man had just jumped out of it. For a second, my brain could not put the picture together. I had looked at that tree. I had noticed the branches were high. I had checked the area and seen no one. Yet now there was a guy on the ground near the tree, standing up after clearly dropping down from it. He had been up there the whole time. While I was pulling in, while I was looking around, while I was getting out of the car, while I was starting to pump gas, this man had been hidden in the tree above the ground, waiting or watching. That realization hit me harder than seeing him itself. A random person walking out from behind the building would have been creepy, but someone dropping out of a tree beside a closed gas station at midnight is something else. It means he had chosen that place. It means he had climbed up there before I arrived. It means he was hidden in a spot no normal person would expect to check. And if I had not heard him hit the ground, I might not have known he was there until he was much closer. As he was standing up, I moved immediately. I did not wait to see what he wanted. I did not call out. I did not ask if he was okay. I did not try to make sense of it. My body understood before my mind finished processing it. I put the nozzle back as fast as I could, threw the gas cap into place without even sealing it properly, closed the gas door and got back into my car. I did everything in that fast, messy way you do when your hands are trying to complete several tasks at once while fear is screaming at you to leave. I did not care if the cap was fully tightened. I did not care if I had pumped enough gas. I just needed to get back inside the car and move. I threw the car into drive and headed toward the highway. The whole time I expected the man to run toward me. That is what my mind was ready for. I expected him to sprint from the tree, maybe yelling or trying to reach the car before I could get away. But he did not do that. As I pulled away, he simply continued walking toward the gas station. That made it almost more unsettling. If he had charged me, the danger would have been obvious. I could have understood it as a direct threat. But his calmness made the situation feel even stranger. He had jumped out of a tree at a closed gas station in the middle of the night, and once I noticed him, he just stood up and walked toward the building like that was normal, like he had not just dropped from a hiding place beside a stranger pumping gas, like he had a plan that did not require rushing. As I made a U-turn to get back toward the highway, I looked back. He was still walking toward the gas station. That image stayed with me. The closed station, the bright pump lights, the dark restaurant across the street, the empty field, the huge tree, and that man calmly walking toward the gas station after jumping out of the tree. Nothing about it fit normal behavior. People do not sit in trees outside closed gas stations at midnight. They do not wait in a tree with branches 6 or 7 feet off the ground. They do not drop down when someone is alone at a pump and then casually walk toward the station without explanation. I kept driving. Once I was back on the road, the fear had time to catch up with me. In the moment, I had been moving on instinct. Pump handle back, gas cap on, door closed, into the car. Drive, but once I was away, I started thinking about what could have happened if I had been slower. What if I had not looked around before getting out? What if I had gone inside if the station had been open? What if I had stood there staring at my phone instead of staying alert? What if he had waited until I was more distracted? What if he had landed closer to me? What if there had been more than one person? The more I thought about it, the worse it felt. The tree bothered me most. I had seen it. I had noticed it. But I had not thought to look up into it. Why would I? People check around cars, behind buildings, near doors, maybe near bushes or corners. They do not usually scan the branches of a huge tree at a gas station, especially not a tree with branches starting high off the ground. But that is exactly where he had been, hidden above the normal line of sight, waiting in the one place I had not considered. That made me feel watched, not just startled. Watched. He had to have seen me arrive. He had to have watched me park, get out, and start pumping gas. He had to have known I was alone. He probably saw me looking around. Maybe he stayed still because he knew I would not notice him. Maybe he decided when to drop down. Maybe I heard him because he slipped, or because he chose to make himself known. I do not know. But the idea that he had been above me in the dark, close enough to drop into the field, makes my skin crawl. I have tried to think of innocent explanations. Maybe he was homeless and sleeping in the tree, but that does not really make sense. It was not a comfortable or easy place to sleep, and the branches were too high. There were buildings nearby, even if closed, and the ground would have been easier than climbing into a tree. Maybe he was hiding from someone. Maybe he was drunk or high. Maybe he was mentally unwell. Maybe he had climbed up there for reasons that only made sense to him. All of that is possible, but none of it made me want to stay and find out. Maybe he was trying to scare people. Maybe he had done it before. Maybe he waited for late-night drivers to stop, then dropped out of the tree to see how they would react. That explanation is creepy too, because it means he was choosing a situation where people were isolated and vulnerable. A person pumping gas at a closed station around midnight is already exposed. Their car is off, or at least stopped. Their attention is split. Their back might be turned. Their hands are busy. A hidden person could get close quickly, and if someone wanted to rob, attack, or trap a driver, that would be the kind of place to do it. I do not know if that was his intention, but I know my body did not trust him. The second I saw him stand up, every instinct told me to leave. I am glad I listened. People sometimes feel silly for reacting strongly when they do not have the full story, but you do not always get the luxury of full information. Sometimes all you get is one impossible detail and a few seconds to decide what to do. A man jumping out of a tree at a closed gas station in the middle of the night was enough information for me. The station itself had seemed safe because of the lights. That is one of the things I think about now. Bright lights can make a place feel protected even when it is not. The pumps were lit. The credit card reader worked. The area looked open, but the building was closed, the inside was dark, and there were no employees, no customers, no witnesses. The lights made it easy for someone hidden in the dark to see me. They did not make me any safer. The 2 homes or apartments nearby did not comfort me either. They may have had people inside, but no one was outside. No one was watching. If something had happened, who knows if anyone would have noticed in time. The restaurant across the street was closed too. The whole little area felt like a stage with all the lights on, but no audience. And I was the only person standing in the open until he dropped out of the tree. I also think about how close I was to skipping that exit. If I had pushed it to the rest stop 40 miles ahead, maybe I would have been fine. Maybe I would have run out of gas. Maybe I would have stopped somewhere worse. I will never know. At the time, stopping there felt like the practical choice. A working pump was right there. Waiting 40 miles on a near-empty tank felt risky. But looking back, that stop was one of those decisions that could have gone very badly because of something I could not have predicted. That is the fear of late-night driving alone. It is not only the road, it is the stops. The places where you have to leave the locked car, gas stations, rest areas, empty parking lots, dark exits. You spend most of the drive moving, protected by speed and glass and metal. Then, suddenly, you have to stop, stand still, and trust the environment around you. That night taught me how quickly a place that looks empty can turn out not to be empty at all. I did not see where the man went after I left. He was walking toward the gas station when I looked back during the U-turn, and then I was gone. I do not know if he went behind the building. I do not know if he watched me leave. I do not know if he went back to the tree. I do not know if he waited for the next person. That last possibility bothers me. What if I was not the first person he had watched that night? What if I was not the last? There is something especially disturbing about not knowing whether you escaped a real threat or simply avoided a strange person. Either way, the fear is real. I may never know if he meant harm. Maybe he was just bizarre. Maybe he was harmless. But harmless people do not usually hide in trees beside closed gas stations at midnight and drop down near someone pumping gas. I do not need a criminal investigation to know that the situation was wrong. I am also glad I did not freeze. People often imagine they will respond perfectly in scary situations. But you never know until it happens. I could have stood there staring, trying to understand. I could have asked him what he was doing. I could have wasted time tightening the gas cap properly. I could have tried to be polite. Instead, I moved fast and got out. The gas cap was not even sealed. That detail almost feels funny now, but it shows how urgent it felt. I did not care about doing things neatly. I cared about leaving. I wonder what he saw from his side. A driver alone at a pump, late at night, likely tired from work, focused on gas, maybe an easy target if that is what he was looking for. Did he think I would not notice him until he was closer? Did he expect me to stay? Did my sudden reaction surprise him? Was he walking toward the station because he had something hidden there? Or because he wanted to get near me? Or because he was pretending he had a normal reason to be there? I will never know. What I know is that the moment I heard something hit the ground, the entire night changed. Before that, I was just a tired person trying to get enough gas to keep driving. After that, I was alone at a closed station with a man who had been hiding in a tree. That is a very specific kind of fear because it reveals that the environment you thought you had checked was not actually clear. You missed the most important thing because it was above you. Since then, I do not trust empty gas stations the same way. I pay attention to more than the pumps. I look around longer. I notice trees, corners, parked cars, dark windows, and places someone could hide. I do not let the lights fool me into thinking a place is safe. A lit pump at a closed station is not the same as a staffed business. If anything, it can make you more visible while keeping everyone else hidden. The memory is not dramatic in the way some scary stories are. There was no chase, no weapon that I saw, no words exchanged, no final reveal. But that almost makes it feel more real. Real fear often looks like a few seconds of wrongness and a fast decision. A sound in the dark, a figure standing up where no person should have been, a gas cap thrown on crooked, a car put into drive, a glance back during a U-turn, a man still walking calmly toward the gas station. That is all it was, and it was enough. I still think about that huge tree in the empty grassy field. I think about how I noticed it but never imagined anyone could be in it. I think about those branches starting 6 or 7 feet off the ground. I think about how long he may have been sitting up there before I arrived. I think about him waiting in the dark while the outside lights made the pumps glow. I think about him dropping down only after I had been there for less than a minute. Maybe he was just some strange man doing something I will never understand. Maybe he was planning something. Maybe he had done it before. Maybe he was waiting for someone exactly like me, alone, tired, low on gas, and stopped at a closed station just after midnight. I do not know. What I do know is that I got off the highway because I did not want to risk running out of gas before the next rest stop. I found a closed gas station with working pumps, checked my surroundings, saw no one, and started filling up. 30 to 60 seconds later, I heard something hit the ground and saw a man standing up after jumping out of a tree beside the station. I left so fast that I did not even seal the gas cap properly. As I made the U-turn back toward the highway, I looked back one last time. He was still walking toward the gas station, and I kept driving. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.